Welcome to History Lessons, an educational channel where we teach you what you need to know for your upcoming exams with targeted content review and interactive practice questions at the ends of each lesson. In this series, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of AP U.S History to review for the Advancement Placement exam. In order to prepare you for the exam, this series follows the timeline as the test and is broken up into the same 9 periods the College Board uses to structure the material of the course. Today we're covering Period 2, from 1607 to 1754 and is weighted about 680 on the exam. This video has 3 sections: a content review, a timeline of key dates, and an interactive practice quiz with 10 questions and answers similar to what you can expect on test days from the content of Period 2. In the content review section, we'll cover 6 main topics: European colonization, the regions of the British Colonies, the Transatlantic Trade, the interactions between American Indians and Europeans, between American Indians and Europeans, slavery in the British Colonies, and Colonial Society and Structure. That's a lot of important information, so grab your notebooks and let's get started. Let's begin with the French settlers in Canada. In 1608, Samuel de Champlain founded Quebec, marking the first permanent French settlement in the region. While the French didn't attract as many colonists as other European powers, they focused on trapping and fur trading as their economic pursuits. Interestingly, they also formed alliances with Native American tribes, such as the Huron and Algonquin, for mutual protection and trade. The French had a profound impact on the Native American tribes they encountered. Although they desired to convert them to Catholicism, their approach was less coercive than that of the Spanish. The French introduced diseases to which the Native Americans had no immunity, resulting in devastating losses for the tribes. Additionally, conflicts arose between tribes vying for control of the fur trade desired by the French. These factors influenced the Native Americans to side with the French during the French and Indian Wars against the British and British colonists. While the French were making their mark in Canada, the Dutch were also making their initial entry into the Americas. In 1609, Henry Hudson discovered and named the Hudson River, leading to the establishment of trading settlements on Manhattan Island, Fort Nassau, later renamed Albany, and in present day, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Like the French, the Dutch primarily engaged in fur trading, but their aggressive expansion brought them into conflict with Native American tribes, limiting their overall success. Now, let's shift our focus to the English settlers in America. Several factors motivated the English to venture across the Atlantic. Population growth, high inflation, and declining wages in England led to overcrowding in cities and increased the number of landless laborers. Many Englishmen sought a fresh start and viewed America as a solution to their economic problems. In addition to economic motivations, religious dissent played a significant role in English colonization. Puritans, who sought a purer church than the Church of England, established the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1629. But before that, the first permanent English settlement in America was Jamestown, founded in 1607 by Captain John Smith. The Jamestown colony faced numerous challenges, including food shortages, and conflicts with the Powhatan Confederacy. Despite these hardships, the Jamestown colony found success through trade alliances with the Powhatan Native Americans, particularly with the help of Pocahontas and John Rolfe. Rolfe's cultivation of tobacco became the colony's main cash crop, driving the demand for labor. Indentured servants and, later, African slaves played crucial roles in meeting the labor needs of Virginia. While the Jamestown colony was taking shape, another group of English settlers, known as the Pilgrims, sought religious freedom in America. They established the Plymouth Colony in 1620 with their ship, the Mayflower, landing at Cape Cod. The Pilgrims faced harsh conditions and a brutal first winter, but thanks to assistance from the Wampanoag tribe, especially Squanto, they were able to survive and establish peaceful relations. Meanwhile, back in England, a larger wave of English settlers arrived in America in the 1630s. Led by John Winthrop, they established the Massachusetts Bay Colony, centered around present-day Boston. Unlike the Pilgrims, these settlers were non-separatist Puritans who aimed to build a city upon a hill, a shining example of a godly community. They created a theocratic society, with religious leaders wielding significant influence over both religious and civic matters. It's important to note that self-governance played a role in the early English colonies. The Pilgrims, upon their arrival in Plymouth, signed the Mayflower Compact. This document established a social contract among the settlers, emphasizing the importance of majority rule and the consent of the governed. This early example of self-government laid the foundation for democratic ideals that would later shape the American system. As we explore the early colonial period, we must also recognize the diversity within these settlements. While the English dominated in numbers, colonies such as New Netherland, later becoming New York, and New Sweden, later absorbed by New Netherland and later England, brought Dutch and Swedish influences, respectively. Additionally, German, French, Irish, and Scottish immigrants began to arrive, contributing to the cultural tapestry of colonial America. However, it's essential to acknowledge that the colonization of America brought significant challenges and hardships for Native American populations. As European settlers expanded their territories, conflicts and tensions arose, often resulting in the displacement and mistreatment of Native Americans. The fur trade, land encroachments, and the spread of diseases further strained relationships between the indigenous peoples and the colonists. Moving right along, the exam stresses that students understand the British Empire's presence in America during this time. In order to do this properly, we need to start with the economic philosophy of mercantilism. According to this theory, a state should strive for economic self-sufficiency, which led European powers like England to establish colonies for raw materials. The colonies were crucial for supplying resources like tobacco, rice, and lumber. The triangular trade system played a significant role in connecting the economies of Europe, the Americas, and Africa. Europeans purchased slaves in Africa and sold them in the Americas, while raw materials from the colonies were sent to Europe. Finished products from Europe were then sold in the colonies, were sent to Europe, were then sold in the colonies. This complex trading system facilitated the growth of colonies and the slave trade. Now, let's shift our focus to a dark chapter in American history. The Salem witch trials. The trials were a result of social unrest in the Massachusetts colony. In 1692, a group of women was accused of witchcraft, leading to a wave of hysteria. Many were jailed, and tragically, 19 people were executed. It's important to note the class dynamics and tensions between the older farm communities and the newer secular class. Wars between European powers had a significant impact on the American colonies during this period. England and France fought a series of conflicts in Europe, which spilled over into the Americas. Native American tribes aligned themselves with either the English or the French. For example, the Iroquois tribe allied with New England troops against the French and their Algonquin allies. Meanwhile, back in the colonies, there was growing resistance to British control. The rise of colonial assemblies, such as those in Massachusetts and Connecticut, demonstrated a desire for more self-government. Though these assemblies were still made up of the landowning elite, it marked a shift in expressing popular opinion and challenging British authority. During this era, there was a concept known as salutary neglect, where British policies focused more on defending their territory and strengthening the economy. This resulted in a relaxed enforcement of trade policies in the American colonies. However, the British still imposed regulations like the Navigation Acts and the Molasses Act to maintain economic control. Before we wrap up, let's touch on a significant religious movement called the First Great Awakening. It was a revival that swept through the American colonies, emphasizing personal religious experiences and challenging traditional religious institutions. This spiritual movement had a profound impact on colonial society. That's it for the content overview section of the video. Next, we'll go over the timeline for this period. Here's 17 important dates from period 2, which spans from 1607 to 1754. 1607, the English settle in Jamestown. 1619, Virginia establishes House of Burgesses, first colonial legislature. 1620, Plymouth Colony founded. 1629, Massachusetts Bay Colony founded. 1634, Maryland Colony founded. 1636, Roger Williams expelled from Massachusetts Bay Colony and settles in Providence, Rhode Island. Connecticut founded by John Hooker, 1642. City of Montreal founded by the French. 1651, first of several navigation acts approved by British Parliament. 1676, Bacon's Rebellion takes place in Virginia. 1682, Dutch monopoly on slave trade ends, greatly reducing the price of slaves coming to the Americas. 1686, creation of Dominion of New England. 1688, glorious revolution in England. James I removed from the throne. 1689, beginning of the War of the League of Augsburg. 1692, witchcraft trials take place in Salem, Massachusetts. 1702, beginning of the War of the Spanish Succession. 1733, enactment of the Molasses Act. 1739, Stono, slave, rebellion in South Carolina. 1740, George Whitefield tours the American colonies, the high point of the Great Awakening. 1754, representatives of colonies meet at Albany Congress to coordinate further Western settlement. Finally, we'll finish up with 10 review questions. I'll read the question and answers aloud and give you a minute to think of your response before providing the correct multiple choice answer and a brief explanation. Let's get started. Question 1. Which colonists enjoyed the best relations with the Native Americans? A. The Spanish, B. The French, C. The Dutch, or D. The English? The answer is B. The French. The French were mainly interested in fur trading rather than farming, and so posed less of a threat to Native American lands. French missionaries and fur traders were more respectful of Native American culture. Question 2. Who of the following was not a religious dissenter in Massachusetts Bay? A. William Bradford, B. Roger Williams, C. Anne Hutchinson, or D. Thomas Hooker? The answer is A. William Bradford. Bradford was a governor of Massachusetts Bay for 20 years. All of the others left for religious reasons and founded colonies elsewhere. Question 3. Which colony was designated as a refugee for English Catholics? A. Pennsylvania, E. South Carolina, C. Maryland, or D. Virginia? The answer is C. Maryland. The colony was settled in 1632 for that purpose. Question 4. English people came to the New World because of A. Their dislike for the Church of England, E. Overcrowding in English cities, C. Economic opportunity, or D. All of the above? The answer is D. All of the above. Question 5. Most early English colonies were different from those of Spain and France because they did which of the following? A. They were not directly ruled by the crown. B. They were granted rights to Indians. C. They were economic failures. Or D. They were more sparsely populated. The answer is A. Most of the early English colonies were governed by companies or proprietors granted charters by the king. Question 6. The creation of the Dominion of New England did which, if the following? A. Increased democracy in the colonies. B. Increased the power of the governor of the area. C. Allowed New England colonies to discuss common grievances. Or D. Guaranteed direct control of the king over affairs in the New England colonies. The answer is B. The creation of the Dominion of New England gave increased power to Sir Edmund Andros. Question 7. Which of the following was a major effect of the Stono Rebellion? A. An increase in the number of slaves brought into the southern colonies. B. Increased fortifications around several southern cities. C. An attempt by slave owners to lessen the horrors of the Middle Passage. Or D. Harsher treatment of slaves in many parts of the South. The answer is D. Many plantation owners were fearful of additional rebellions and felt that harsh treatment of slaves would prevent rebellious behavior. Question 8. The growth of colonial assemblies alarmed the British for all of the following reasons except A. Assemblies holding the power of the purse could ultimately undermine British control. B. Assemblies increased democratic tendencies in the colonies. C. Assemblies occasionally ignored or resisted instructions from Great Britain. Or D. Governors appointed in Britain had little control over these assemblies in most colonies. The answer is B. These assemblies were in no way democratic, as in every colony they were dominated by the landowning elite. Question 9. For the British, the major economic role of the American colonies was which of the following? I. To produce manufactured goods the English did not want to produce. B. To produce crops such as tobacco. C. To produce raw materials such as lumber. Or D. Both B and C? The answer is D. The role of the colonies under mercantilism was to provide England with crops and raw materials. And finally, question 10. What changes in the slave system of the southern colonies began in the 1730s? A. The Dutch lost the monopoly on slave trading, thus increasing the number of slaves being brought into the Americas. B. Conditions during the Middle Passage began to slightly improve. C. More slaves began to live and work on larger plantations. Or D. A series of slave rebellions created much harsher treatment for slaves. The answer is C. Before the 1730s, most slaves worked on small farms. The Dutch lost their monopoly on slave trading back in 1682. The Stono Rebellion was the first major slave rebellion and occurred in 1739. And that's the end of the quiz. Hopefully you answered most of these questions correctly. If not, make sure to go back and review your notes or rewatch the video. And with that, we've reached the end of our review for Period 2. Next up, we'll be covering Period 3, 1754 to 1800. Keep working hard and see you next time